Is there another reason other than oil that they went down there? Some people think yes. And we start with this. Analysts argued that satellite images reveal a Venezuelan launch site that could send ballistic missiles as far north as Washington, D.C. This all kind of starts way back when Hugo Chavez named this guy his successor. Now, I don't know how you can name, if you're actually running a democracy, I don't know how you can name somebody a successor in a democracy without it happening. So that's the first kind of red flag. But way back in 2018, 2019, way back, it's 7 years ago, there was an election in Venezuela, and Murata won by around 1.5% of the vote, and it was around, I think, 200,000 votes or something like that. So in terms of a national election, that's about as razor thin as you can possibly get. Throughout that election, there was claims everywhere that were being reported, that were being shouted in the streets and raised up about fraud everywhere. So all the candidates that were involved were calling on the officials to do a recount, to do an audit, to do an investigation, and virtually all was denied. And then a couple years later, a fiery female political actor in Venezuela really started making her name known, and her name is Maria Corina Machado. Hopefully I've said that correctly. Spanish is not my first language, nor my second, nor my third, nor any language. And she was really gunning to be the leader of the opposition down in Venezuela to take on the regime that was in power and try to bring some sort of peace, some sort of freedom, some sort of relief from all of the policies that were going on down there in the next election. And what you're going to see now is a video from back in 2023 where she's actually speaking to an interviewer in France, and it's all in English, about what happened around that time, and it's an interesting foreshadow of what's coming ahead. So let's take a look.
In late October, you won a popular vote to be the opposition candidate. Does this mean that for sure you will be the only candidate of the opposition against Nicolas Maduro? I'm asking this because we've seen in the past that the opposition is often very divided. Is there a guarantee that you will face Nicolas Maduro and no one else?
Well, no one can guarantee that the regime will perhaps promote another individual with the idea of dividing the will of the people. But it was so strong, so profound, so emotional what we lived on October 22nd. It was 3 times or 4 times our best estimate that actually the amount of people that came out. We ran out of ballots in many places, even though people were, as I said before, threatened in order not to participate. So I do think that that will not work. And that certainly Venezuelans today, we are more united than ever, and we're conscious that we do have a huge opportunity to defeat this regime and move ahead in a very complex and delicate transition to democracy.
So, in the interview, she later goes on to talk talking to the interviewer, and the interviewer says something to the effect of, "So, do you think your last obstacle is gone? Because now you've been appointed this." And she says, "No, I absolutely do not think that this is the last obstacle." And she talks a little bit about some of the warning signs that she's seen. Well, she was very much justified in her concern because of what happened next.
Venezuela's Supreme Court disqualifies opposition leader from running for president. The ruling on Friday bars the presidential candidacy of Maria Corina Machado, a longtime government foe whose opposition faction is backed by the United States. And this was back on January the 27th of 2024. Venezuela's Supreme Court, loyal to President Nicolas Maduro's government on Friday, January the 26th, disqualified opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, who handily won a 2023 primary vote, from seeking election this year. The court upheld a 15-year ban on Machado, 56, from holding public office and also confirmed the ineligibility of a possible opposition stand-in, two-time presidential candidate Enrique Capriles. The United States and others have repeatedly called for the reinstatement of disqualified opposition candidates ahead of elections, for which a date has yet to be set. Maduro's government and the opposition agreed in talks in Barbados last year to hold a free and fair vote in 2024 with international observers present. That agreement saw the United States ease sanctions against Venezuela, allowing Chevron to resume limited oil extraction as part of an effort to keep down global prices as the West pressed sanctions on Russia over the war in Ukraine. It also led to a prisoner swap. But the Supreme Court said Friday Machado would remain disqualified, quote, for being involved in the corruption plot orchestrated by the usurper Juan Guaido. Guaido, now in exile, was recognized by dozens of countries as the legitimate winner of the elections in 2018 that saw Maduro inaugurated for a second successive term despite widespread fraud claims. Maduro has not confirmed he will seek a third term, but is widely expected to do so. In its ruling against Machado, the court said Guaido's plot had led to a, quote, criminal blockade of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, as well as the shameless dispossession of the companies and wealth of the Venezuelan people abroad with the complicity of corrupt governments, end quote. Machado replied on X that, quote, Maduro and his criminal system chose the worst path for them, fraudulent elections. That is not going to happen. Let no one doubt it. This is to the end. Quote, today more than ever, let nothing and no one remove us from the electoral route, end quote, Capriles wrote on X after the ruling. Quote, 2024 has to be the year of the Venezuelan people, end quote. Maduro on Thursday said that the Barbados agreement was, quote, mortally wounded, end quote, after government authorities claimed to have foiled numerous plots to assassinate him.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's how you steal an election. As the governing body, you just prevent any opponents that are any threat to you from actually running in it. And then you say, oh, well, the reason why I'm disqualifying you is because you were involved with the guy who didn't like the result of the last election that I stole as well. And because he was calling me out and instigating a plot to investigate and audit and overturn the results of that election, now you're disqualified. So thank you very much, and you're out of here. And what was interesting in the video, if you caught it, she'd said that when she was elected as the leader of the opposition, they ran out of ballots because so many people came out to vote. And what was happening is the government was actually threatening Venezuelans with retaliation if they did go out and vote for her, that they were going to take away their food stamps, that they were threatening violence against them, threatening arrests. This is the level of corruption that was going on in Venezuela. This is why so many Venezuelans have left Venezuela, much to their heartache, because they've left their family behind, they've left parents behind, they've left everything behind.
They left their entire lives behind.
This is one of the reasons and this has been a long time, why Anita Polyev's parents left Venezuela. Her dad was a banker in Venezuela. And for him to just say, we can't live here anymore, and literally leave everything, come to Canada, and go from a banking job to driving a cab, so his family could actually have money and food on the table. It's hard to appreciate even what we do have in Canada when we've never lived in these other places. And this is why when you look at the diaspora communities in Canada, especially the one in Markham Unionville, I want to give a special shout out to them and Joe Tay and all of those folks that have organized and just repeatedly protested Michael Ma's constituency office. Like, that's the type of passion that we need to see in this country if we want to stand up and fight for a better tomorrow. So when you listen to these folks that have come here from these countries that democracy literally doesn't exist because it's been stolen away, and they say, listen, this is why I came to Canada, it's very humbling to listen to them. And I've had people work for me from the Philippines, from mainland China, from Sri Lanka, from India, like all over the world. And it's really something to listen to their perspective and the difference that they see in Canada versus these other countries. So this is just to give everybody context. And one of the things, and I'm going to put it in here because I don't think I included it, but I'm going to now, is one of the things that I was very surprised about. I hadn't heard this, and Tanya hadn't heard this as well, was the fact that Machado, after that had happened, she was actually living in hiding in the country until 3 weeks ago. And what happened 3 weeks ago? She extradited herself secretly from the country. Let's take a look at that.
Venezuelan opposition leader and Nobel laureate Maria Corina Machado escaping her home country to arrive in Norway, as you just saw there. Machado has been living in hiding in her own country for almost a year, fearing persecution by President Nicolás Maduro. CBS News has an exclusive interview with one of the rescue crew members who was actually there the moment Machado was rescued by boat.
We got her on the boat, and I said, my name is Brian Stern from Grable Rescue. Welcome aboard. She was very happy. She's very excited. She's very tired, very wet, very cold.
For the first time in nearly a year, we heard from her, and she spoke earlier today in Norway. CBS News Miami's Yvonne Taylor has more.
I am very hopeful Venezuela will be free.
58-year-old Maria Corina Machado spoke this morning in Oslo. She greeted supporters last night in the Norwegian capital after missing the award ceremony of the Nobel Peace Prize because of security measures about her journey leaving Venezuela.
We will welcome not only the Venezuelans that have been forced to flee.
The opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize recipient has left questions unanswered about her departure from her country. CBS News learned that Machado escaped Venezuela via the Dutch-controlled island of Curacao, which is located about 40 miles north of Venezuela. The Wall Street Journal was first to report details of her journey to Oslo.
So, the intent here is just for those of you that don't know the backstory, and this is all unfortunately surface level. There is so much more to understand about the Maduro regime and what they've been doing in Venezuela than we can cover in a reasonable amount of time. But this is all of the context of why so many world leaders have condemned Maduro, have been speaking out against it, and regard him as, frankly, an illegitimate leader. Then the news dropped over the weekend about what happened with Mr. Maduro when he went to bed and woke up surrounded by, no doubt, SEAL Team 6 members. And then shortly after that, we had a press conference that was about an hour long by President Donald Trump, And I've taken a few minutes of that so you can get some of the context of that if you haven't seen it, and you'll get a bit of an idea of the narrative and the explanation and what he had to say during that press conference.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about. We want peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela, and that includes many from Venezuela that are now living in the United States and want to go back to their country. It's their homeland. We can't take a chance that somebody else takes over Venezuela that doesn't have the good of the Venezuelan people in mind. We've had decades of that. We're not going to let that happen. We're there now, and what people don't understand, but they understand as I say this, we're there now, but we're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place. So we're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it, essentially, until such time as a proper transition can take place. As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust, for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave if we needed to do so. We actually assumed that a second wave would be necessary, but now it's probably not. The first wave, if you'd like to call it that, the first attack was so successful, we probably don't have to do a second, but we're prepared to do a second wave, a much bigger wave, actually. This was pinpoint, but we have a much bigger wave that probably won't have to do. This partnership of Venezuela with the United States of America, a country that everybody wants to be involved with because of what we were able to do and accomplish, will make the people of Venezuela rich, independent, and safe. And it will also make the many, many people from Venezuela that are living in the United States extremely happy. They suffered. They suffered. So much was taken from them. They're not going to suffer anymore. The illegitimate dictator Maduro was the kingpin of a vast criminal network responsible for trafficking colossal amounts of deadly and illicit drugs into the United States. As alleged in the indictment, he personally oversaw the vicious cartel known as Cartel de las Solas, which flooded our nation with lethal poison, responsible for the deaths of countless Americans, the many, many Americans. Hundreds of thousands over the years of Americans died because of him. Maduro and his wife will soon face the full might of American justice and stand trial on American soil. Right now they're on a ship. They'll be heading to, ultimately, New York, and then a decision will be made, I assume, between New York and Miami or Florida. But we have people where the overwhelming evidence of their crimes will be presented in a court of law. And I've seen it. I've seen what we have. It's both horrible and breathtaking that something like this could have been allowed to take place. For many years after his term as president of Venezuela expired, Maduro remained in power and waged a ceaseless campaign of violence, terror, and subversion against the United States of America, threatening not only our people, but the stability of the entire region. And you all saw it. In addition to trafficking gigantic amounts of illegal drugs that inflicted untold suffering and human destruction all over the country, all over in particular the United States, Maduro sent savage and murderous gangs, including the bloodthirsty prison gang Tren de Aragua, to terrorize American communities nationwide. And he did indeed. They were in Colorado. They took over apartment complexes. They cut the fingers off people if they call police. They were brutal. But they're not so brutal now. And I just have to congratulate our military, Pete and everybody, and our National Guard. This extremely successful operation should serve as warning to anyone who would threaten American sovereignty or endanger American lives. Very importantly, the embargo on all Venezuelan oil remains in full effect. The American Armada remains poised in position, and the United States retains all military options until United States demands have been fully met and fully satisfied. All political and military figures in Venezuela should understand what happened to Maduro can happen to them, and it will happen to them if they aren't just fair, even to their people. The dictator and terrorist Maduro is finally gone, and Venezuela people are free. They're free again. It's been a long time for them, but they're free. America is a safer nation. This morning, it's a prouder nation this morning because it didn't allow this horrible person and this country that was doing very bad things to us. It didn't allow it to happen. And the Western Hemisphere is right now a much safer place to be. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank General Raisin Kane. He's a fantastic man. I've worked with a lot of generals. I worked with some I didn't like. I worked with some I didn't respect. I worked with some that just weren't good. But this guy is fantastic. I watched last night one of the most precise attacks on sovereignty. I mean, it was an attack for justice. And I'm very proud of him, and I'm very proud of our Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who I'm going to ask to say a few words. Thank you very much.
So, as everybody corrected my joke, it was Delta Force, not SEAL Team 6 that he woke up around. And people are saying Delta Force best in the world. Like, no joke. Delta Force, you don't mess around with Delta Force. But the crazy thing is this whole thing happened, I believe, in 2.5 hours. And it was surgical. And we were able to find some footage from a journalist that lives in Caracas. And she gave her account as to what happened.
I started hearing the planes around 2 a.m. local time, and I heard a huge sound, a loud bang that moved all the windows, not only on my place, but around the area. And immediately after, I saw a huge smoke, a cloud of smoke, and that almost blocked the entire view, and a lot of detonations. And immediately after, a lot of people started reporting from different parts of Caracas, of the capital of Caracas, the same things that I was witnessing, the same reports, the same explosions, the same sounds of planes and helicopters flying all over the city. Now, we do know that the Venezuelan government, Nicolas Maduro, issued a statement, and the government confirmed that this attack was not only in Caracas, but in Miranda and Aragua, and also in La Guaira. So Aragua and La Guaira are very important locations in Venezuela. Military, they're very important for the military, of course, but in La Guaira, it's where the port and the airport are. And apparently, there are reports of the port of Venezuela being absolutely destroyed.
So that was a fascinating account for someone that saw it happening, literally saw it happening. And the fact that she said that there were reports that one of the ports was just completely destroyed. And we're going to get into a little bit more detail of where they actually hit in the country. But there's another BBC account that kind of gives a general account of everything that happened. And one of the things to note is that Donald Trump had stated that they're going to be working with the vice president in Venezuela on the transition. Well, the vice president of Venezuela is a loyalist to the regime, so she wasn't having that, and she's condemning the whole thing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But here's the BBC account.
It was a sight not seen since the Cold War, a Latin American city under US fire. In the dead of night, bases across Venezuela were struck in a huge coordinated strike. Terrified people, some thinking it was an earthquake, soon realized they were under attack. But this was not designed to be the start of a prolonged campaign, but rather cover for an operation to capture Venezuela's president. A few hours later, this extraordinary image was released by President Trump. Nicolas Maduro, who just a few hours before had ruled over tens of millions of people in US custody on board the USS Iwo Jima.
It was dark and it was deadly, but captured along with his wife, Celia Flores, both of whom now face American justice.
For more than a decade, Nicolas Maduro had ruled over Venezuela. He had overseen an authoritarian regime. Just over a year ago, he claimed victory in highly disputed elections. In recent months, his forces had been on high alert, a response to the ramping up of pressure from the US. That pressure took the form of a massive build-up of forces in the Caribbean. The US had always insisted it was about combating drug smuggling, but few thought that was credible. And yesterday it was confirmed. Their aim was regime change.
We demand the immediate liberation of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores, the only president of Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro.
But that will not happen. The US says Nicolas Maduro and his wife will face federal charges in New York, where they arrived yesterday afternoon. According to President Trump, the US is now in charge of Venezuela.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years.
Many people, including Nicolas Maduro, have always insisted this was about Venezuela's vast oil reserves. That view will not have been changed by this announcement.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
The war is here.
Even before the US announced its temporary takeover, there had been condemnation from many quarters. Protesters gathered outside the White House.
The people united will never be defeated.
But inside Venezuela, the shock of the night soon turned to fear for what might come next.
Look, you see the streets empty. People are in their own thing, buying things to go back home. A lot of uncertainty in the entire country for everyone. You, me, someone walking. What will happen tomorrow? What will happen in the next hour? Nobody knows, but well, it's an enigma that we are living right now.
So, it's interesting to see the BBC's take on that, and I think it's interesting that they showed a bunch of protests out in front of the White House. I don't know if there was a lot of Venezuelans protesting that, but it's interesting to just see the attack, the munitions that are falling. One of the shots, it looked like there was an A-10 gunship maybe deployed. It's hard to see, but in one of the accounts that I read, and this is what makes this all the more impressive, over 150 aircraft were in the air over that 2.5 hours from the United States. That is an incredible amount of aircraft in the air being deployed for this type of mission. So that would include helicopters, that would include fighter escort, fighter bombers. Like, it's just a very, very large operation. And for there to be, as far as we know, no civilian casualties, only military targets hit, no American fatalities, and it all happened within 2.5 hours. That is a massive surgical operation. And it's just, it astounds me to hear that. And it makes you wonder how long they've been planning this, right? So the issue that Trump is going to have is the narrative about oil, and we're going to get to that in a bit. But before we do, this is a map of what the targets were actually hit during the night. So you can see here, you can see the Port La Guardia, and I'm going to butcher all of these Latin names, and I apologize for that. But you can see everywhere that was hit, and you can see Caracas there, and the airport out in the east. So all of these targets were hit by the U.S. in order to actually go in and get the president and pull him out with his wife. And by the account that journalist gave, if that is correct, the port up in the north there was completely decimated by the United States military. So just an astounding operation. Now, the one thing that we have to say, because we're being completely objective here, do we agree that, like, are we complaining that Maduro was taken out and captured? Not really. But did the United States have international justification to do that?
Also not really.
The answer is no.
Yeah.
And this is the interesting part here, because this is not the first time the United States has done this, right? They went in and got bin Laden out. They went into Pakistani airspace, covertly got him, and were leaving as the Pakistani Air Force was chasing them. So this is not the first time that they've done something like this. Did the same thing with Saddam Hussein. And there's other operations around the world where they've done similar things. Were they allowed? This becomes the question for the politicians and the lawmakers.
Or the philosophers even.
Or the philosophers, right? Because there's going to be arguments to and from. But that's not the same as, do you agree that it was a good thing for the country? Well, time will tell. When the U.S. went into Iraq and changed that regime over, that didn't go over well. When they went into Afghanistan to get rid of the Taliban, that ended up almost accomplishing nothing.
Right, because as soon as they withdrew, things went back to the way they were.
So the hope is that the United States State Department and their intelligence agencies and their foreign offices have all learned from all of those scenarios, and we can see the Venezuelan people left with hopefully what will be a legitimate democratically elected government and some peace in their lives. Like that's all we can hope for them after this.
Well, and again, you're seeing a lot of people from Venezuela on social media saying that this is a good thing. So, I mean, sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Sometimes you have to do something that's maybe not right in order to have a good result.
Sometimes legally right isn't morally right.
Yeah, that too.
Or sometimes morally right isn't legally right. And the only thing that I constantly think about when it comes to these things is precedent. Do we want to allow any country to be able to just go in and take somebody's leader? That's the question that I think needs to be asked. And I think the general answer is no. But what do you say in this specific scenario? So
it's muddy. It's not clear cut.
Now we're going to get into the whys very shortly and see and talk about the justification that the U.S. had going in. But before that, we had all the liberal reactions of, oh my goodness, and this is terrible and everything like that. Well, the problem with people on the far left and the virtue signalers is they're always deciding for everybody else what is good for them. They're also deciding for everybody else what is bad for them. Well, you don't know any better. You're in that group, and I know better for you. Yet we're also told that we're not allowed to speak if we're not a member of that group. So only they get to, right? So this is just some of what was going on around the world by Venezuelans.
But excitement is in the air for supporters of the opposition, led by Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado outside the country. Venezuelans celebrated in Peru with people like Milagros Ortega talking of returning home.
My dad, being a political leader in Venezuela, was able to see this change. He used to say, "Daughter, when you go back, when this government leaves, you'll return to Venezuela." And to know that my dad in his lifetime was able to see the fall of Nicolas Maduro, look, for me it's an emotion. I would like to see his face.
Since 2014, around 7.7 million Venezuelans have left the country, according to the UN International Organization for Migration. Venezuelans living in Spain also rejoiced at Maduro's capture, while they tried to get hold of friends and relatives still in the country. Some of them are sheltering at home. A few other people in Caracas went out to stock up on essentials. Some of them are concerned that they may now have to hunker down for a prolonged period, uncertain of what is to come.
I haven't really heard of any Venezuelans that are abroad, of the 7 million people, that are saying, shoot, why did you go in and capture the guy that forced me to leave my country? I haven't really heard any of that. And the only criticism I've been hearing is literally from far left liberals. That's the only thing that I've really been hearing.
And the fear mongering coming from them as well.
Oh yeah.
Are we going to get to that in a bit, or?
We're going to talk about it a little bit. But wanted to just to show that. And speaking of Venezuelans that ended up moving because of the regime and celebrating, well, I'm sure most of you have seen this, but if you haven't, this is a tweet from Anita Polyev. The courage of one woman. And I'm not going to butcher the Spanish, but that's Machado there, obviously on the car, and she's just celebrating the movement that Machado helped lead, and the fact that Machado had to leave because she was going to be persecuted, and that there's all kinds of Venezuelans that are stocking up in Venezuela because they are now really afraid of what the regime may do. What's going to happen now? That's one of the questions. But they're also concerned of, is the military action over? What do I do now? for the average Venezuelan. Like, do you get up and go to work? What if you work at a military base? It's got to be some very uncertain and very scary times for folks in there. And is my government going to retaliate against me because of what happened? That's the question that's going through my head and maybe a lot of folks' heads down in Venezuela. So our thoughts are with them as they navigate what is going to be a very, very anxiety-riddled next few weeks, at least in that country. So, but there were other reactions. From Pierre Poilievre, congratulations to President Trump on successfully arresting narco-terrorist and socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro, who should live out his days in prison. The legitimate winner of the most recent Venezuelan elections, Edmundo Gonzalez, should take office along with the courageous hero and voice of the Venezuelan people, Maria Corina Machado. Down with socialism, long live freedom. There was another response that came many hours later. So I'm not going to read it because it doesn't really say anything. All it really says, well, this is what it says, because I replied to it. So I said, whoever wrote this must have had instructions like this. Okay, we need to say something. It has to be lengthy. We can't condemn it because that would make us hypocrites for calling it Venezuela for years, but we can't support it because that would make me agree with Poilievre and Trump. So just go through to the dictionary, find a bunch of words, and put them together. Oh, and avoid using the word catalyze, because people are catching on that I say that too much. It really is my favorite word. Maybe we put it in? No, leave it out for real. Just make sure the statement catalyzes our base. Damn it! I said it. So that's really what it says. But in all seriousness, what Mark Carney was essentially doing there was trying to sit on the fence as much as he possibly could, because of those reasons. How do you condemn it while calling out the illegitimacy of its leader? How do you support it if you're Mark Carney? If you're telling everybody, elbows up, everybody, elbows up, and telling everybody that Pierre Poilievre is just like Donald Trump, and Trump's a bad guy, okay? How do you support it? And he is now in the pickle of Justin Trudeau, because when you're trying to support everybody, and this goes back to one of the things that we said at the beginning, when you're trying to support everybody, you end up supporting nobody except yourself. And this is where the problems end up arising. And there were other responses.
Big players on the global stage reacted in the early hours, with Russia's Foreign Affairs Ministry saying it's, quote, extremely concerned, end quote, by Maduro's capture, calling it a, quote, grave violation of sovereignty and international law, end quote.
All right. Let me get this straight. Russia, who's literally invaded, taken territory of a country for the last few years, is complaining that the U.S. went into Venezuela and took 2 people, and they're calling that a violation of sovereignty? Really, Vladimir?
Well, because Russia is an ally of Venezuela.
100%. But pot, meat, kettle. Kettle, meat, pot. So I just found that very, very hypocritical. Anyway, let's continue.
Quote, the U.S. committed an act of armed aggression against Venezuela, which gives rise to deep concern and warrants condemnation, end quote, the ministry said on X. Quote, the pretexts used to justify these actions are untenable, end quote. Iran and China, 2 American adversaries, spoke out strongly against the situation. Quote, what matters is that when a person realizes the enemy is arrogantly trying to impose something on a country, on the officials, on the government, and on the nation, one must stand firmly against the enemy and bare one's chest in resistance. We will not yield to the enemy, end quote. Iran's supreme leader, I'm going to butcher this, it's Ayatollah Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Is that close?
Yeah.
Okay. Said, according to Reuters. Meanwhile, China expressed quote-unquote shock and also condemned such use of force.
So Iran, that literally bankrolled all of the terrorists in Hamas to go in and slaughter a bunch of people in Israel. So that's Iran, expressing shock about this, and you need to resist, people that are doing bad things. And China, that literally wants to annex and take over Taiwan against its will, has threatened the Philippines and has threatened Japan if they continue to speak out against that. Right. Got it. And this takes me back to something Trump said, folks. What Trump said was he laid a shot across the bow. And I think this was a really good thing. Because what he said is that we just gave a warning to everybody. And that warning is that we are willing to back up our talk. And if you want to start messing with us through one of your proxy states, that's not going to happen. So it sent a message to China and Russia that Trump isn't necessarily all talk, he's willing to back it up. And that makes you pause. Because when you have somebody that is at the head of the most powerful arsenal in the world by a country mile, and I'm not just talking about nuclear weapons, I'm just talking total armed forces strength, and they're not afraid to use it, and they can pull off an operation like this large, but be this successful and this surgical, it gives you pause. So I thought that was very, very interesting that he said that. And I thought that was very, very interesting geopolitical play in his press conference. And I think there was more to that as well. But we're going to get to the next part here, which is there another reason other than oil that they went down there? Some people think yes. And we start with this. So this is an article from the National Post, and this was posted, I think, a couple days ago. Yesterday? 2 days ago. No, yesterday. And it says satellite images raised speculation about Venezuela's military capability against the U.S. Private sleuths, and that's a pretty, I would say, insulting word to these folks. They're not just like internet people. Private sleuths have suggested military developments in Venezuela may be the real reason for American actions. A stunning U.S. raid to capture Venezuela's president came after a group of amateur intelligence analysts argued that satellite images reveal a Venezuelan launch site that could send ballistic missiles as far north as Washington, D.C. There was no indication that the American attack had anything to do with the subject of the group's claims, which the U.S. military dismissed earlier as quote-unquote speculative, and one top expert rated as plausible but unproven by the evidence. The U.S. military isn't going to say, "Oh, you got us. That's why we went." Days before the American strike on Venezuela, the private sleuths suggested military developments in Venezuela with Russian, Chinese, and Iranian troops stationed nearby may have been the real reason for U.S. actions around the South American country, not the controversial targeting of alleged drug smuggling vessels asserted by U.S. forces. Quote, "I don't think it has a damn thing to do with drug boats," end quote, said Lee Wheelbarger, a former U.S. Army technology developer who leads the private military analysts. Quote, "I think the drug boats are completely irrelevant. That's an excuse," end quote. Meanwhile, separate images show a Cuban airfield with a collection of Russian quote-unquote kitchen missiles designed to destroy warships, claims the group. A leading expert in the region said the group's interpretation of the imagery, quote unquote, could be true, given Venezuela's well-documented military ties with some of the state's top geopolitical adversaries. But Evan Ellis, a research professor at the U.S. Army College of War, said it falls short of proof of a dangerous new threat to the U.S. And there's other analysis out there that people that are much more educated about this than we are, since, as we repeatedly remind people, our specialty is Canadian federal politics, not geopolitical Venezuelan and U.S. strategic disagreements. But they are on the side of agreeing with these analysts that this has nothing to do with drugs, zero, and it may not even have that much to do with oil, but it has something to do with oil. But it could do a lot of the fact that there are Russian and Chinese and Iranian assets in Venezuela and maybe funneling into Venezuela.
Well, and also that we learned through speaking to a friend that Hezbollah operates out of Venezuela as well.
Right. So, this is the question, and the reality is we may never know the exact reason why Donald Trump went into Venezuela. I don't think the U.S. military would have gone in on just a whim. This would have come from intelligence being fed up to Donald Trump. It's not like Donald Trump just decided, well, I'm going to go into Venezuela now.
Well, if you think of it, if you go with the theory that they have operatives operating in Venezuela, I mean, Russia, China, and Iran are all half a world away. But if you have those operatives operating in Venezuela, which is just to the south of you, that's a problem.
It's also not the first time Russia has operated out of the Caribbean. As some of the older folks might remember the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s? They wanted missiles on Cuban soil, so they were not too far away from the U.S. coast. And at that time, they didn't have ballistic missiles that they could fire from Russia and hit the targets of opportunity in the United States. So they moved them into Cuba. And that almost started World War III, because...
That was in the 50s, wasn't it?
It was either late 50s or early 60s.
Yeah.
So that is... there's some precedent behind that, right? So, but this is where the discussion can happen. This is where the discussion is going to rage online about. And what happens next, right? Well, nobody knows what's going to happen next. There's questions about, is the U.S. going to cut off Canadian oil? Don't know. Are they just hoping to supplement their oil supplier? Don't know. It all depends on what their intentions are.
Well, but we have read that the infrastructure down in Venezuela is very old and decrepit, so it will take
years.
Yeah, many years. I think I was reading up to 10 years to actually get things functional.
Yeah, so for anybody that is worried that this is going to immediately displace Canadian oil if the intent of the United States is to actually replace it, I wouldn't be too worried about that. It's not going to be done.
No, they're not just going to flip a switch tomorrow and it's going to happen.
And Trump's going to be gone by the time that it even happens, right? So that's something to just consider when it comes to these types of things. But this is where it makes for lack of a better term, good discussion. And nobody knows but Trump and his inner circle as to what the end game is going to be. And we're going to have to be like Iron Man and the rest of the Avengers in Endgame and just wait to see how all this plays out. But we're not done with our reactions. But before we get to that, this was something else that wanted to flag to everybody as part of the potential reason that they went in. And this was actually published on the United States Treasury Department website, and it was published on December 30th, 2025.
Treasury targets Iran-Venezuela weapons trade. Sanctioned company linked to sale of millions of dollars worth of combat drones to Venezuela. Washington. Today, the U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, is targeting 10 individuals and entities based in Venezuela and Iran, including a Venezuelan company that has contributed to Iran's unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV, trade with Venezuela. Quote, Treasury is holding Iran and Venezuela accountable for their aggressive and reckless proliferation of deadly weapons around the world, end quote, said Treasury Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence John K. Hurley. Quote, we will continue to take swift action to deprive those who enable Iran's military-industrial complex access to the U.S. financial system, end quote. This action builds on Treasury's non-proliferation designations in October and November in support of the September 27, 2025 reimposition of the United Nations sanctions and other restrictions on Iran. Iran's UAV and missile programs threaten U.S. and allied personnel in the Middle East and destabilize commercial shipping in the Red Sea. Additionally, Iran's ongoing provision of conventional weapons to Caracas constitutes a threat to U.S. interests in the Western Hemisphere, including the homeland, and the United States will use all available measures to prevent this trade. The action is being taken in furtherance of National Security Presidential Memorandum 2, which directs the U.S. government to curtail Iran's ballistic missile program, counter Iran's development of other asymmetric and conventional weapons capabilities, deny Iran a nuclear weapon, and deny the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, access to assets and resources that sustain their destabilizing activities. OFAC is taking this action pursuant to Executive Order 13382, which targets weapons of mass destruction, WMD, proliferators and their supporters, and Executive Order 13949, which targets property of certain persons with respect to the conventional arms activities of Iran.
So when we found this one, and credit to Vesper on this one, because he brought this to my attention, this mirrors a lot of what was being said by these analysts in that National Post article. And there's nothing to do with narcotics discussed in this. So they're talking about UAVs, or unmanned aerial vehicles. They're talking about ballistic missiles. They're talking about all these weapons that are being funneled from Iran into Venezuela. You know, the same thing that they were doing when it came to Hamas. Like, Iran just is trying to stir crap up all around the world. And are they acting as a proxy for some of the other geopolitical powers like Russia and China? Wouldn't surprise me, but you know, that's just pure speculation at this point. And someone had mentioned that Russia's been, you know, dealing with Venezuela for a while now. 100%. And that's why we've said, like, you know, this is not going to all of a sudden be fixed overnight. This is going to be really messy in the world of geopolitics for the next couple of years, because everything is kind of needing to settle down, and we're gonna have to see where this goes and what else is in store for Venezuela. So our hope was just that, you know, I hope these people get to find peace and they can vote in fair elections, and they don't have to worry about opposition candidates disappearing, opposition candidates that are a threat to the regime in power that just disappear or are denied the democratic right to actually run. So, but there was another one. There was another reaction that we have to share. So I was actually sent this by our MP, Ned Curick, and this was a CBC Radio Canada article. And I don't know who they were writing about, but they wanted everybody to believe that they were writing about Nicolas Maduro. because they call him a man of the people.
Wow.
And they go on to say that, you know, he struggled and that he was such a great leader and such a great guy. And again, I don't know who they're talking about here, but it was frankly disgusting that they put this out after this guy was captured, and you see Venezuelans all around the world celebrating. Like, this is what I was talking about before. When people on the far left, they're so uninformed, and they let their ideology get in the way of morality, and they let their ideology get in the way of common sense.
Well, and I think it's just an oppositional defiance. Like, they see Pierre Poilievre praising the fact that he was taken into custody, and you see, I think a lot of conservative leaning folks are in support of this measure, and I think the Liberals are just, I don't know, they're doing it to be opposite to the Conservatives. Like, that's all I can figure.
And this is I think this is a cautionary tale for all of us included, because you constantly have to check yourself when you're automatically disagreeing with somebody that has a different political stripe than you. If you are disagreeing with them just because they are a liberal, that's a problem. If you're disagreeing with them because you believe they're legitimately wrong, that's not a problem. But even us, sometimes, I find myself reacting to something, and then I sit and I think about it. I'm like, okay, maybe this is a rare situation where that person that's on the other side of the aisle actually has a point. So beware the echo chamber, beware, and we said this before, beware of getting caught in ideology that prevents you from seeing all there is to see instead of just what you want to see. So just be careful out there, folks. We go through this every day, and we believe that Canadians deserve the truth, no matter how good or how bad it is. So, and sometimes you may agree with the person on the other side of the aisle, and that's not a bad thing. If somebody on the other side of the aisle is doing something that I want them to, great. Like, if Carney got in and literally implemented the Conservative agenda like the way it was supposed to happen, I would be clapping. But he's not. He's doing everything but. He's painting the outside, but on the inside, it's still all rotting and falling down. So, but there was one more thing that we want to show, and there was a crazy tweet that the White House put out, and no doubt Trump had some input on it. We can't show it because we'll get copyright struck by the music, but we can show the first part of it, and it was Nicolas Maduro seemingly daring Trump to come and get him, and then it goes on to show Marco Rubio was basically like, well, yeah, we came and got you. and there was some rap music behind it, and it was some good fun. But that's not what happened. And everyone thinks that's what happened. Everyone thinks that Nicolas Maduro dared Trump to come and get him. No, that's actually not what happened. And we're going to show you exactly what happened. So, hopefully I set the video up here properly. Yeah, here it is. So, without further ado, folks, this is what the White House posted, at least the first part of the clip, and then what actually happened.
Venga por mí. Aquí lo espero en Miraflores. No se tarde en llegar, cobarde.
I say to the coward Gonzalez Urrutia, to the new Guaido, Mr. Coward, don't mess with a humble woman in your home and family, Mr. Coward. Don't mess with the common man. Come to me here. I am waiting for you in Miraflores. Mr. Gonzalez Urrutia. Come to me, coward.
So that was the original video. So he wasn't talking to Donald Trump. He wasn't talking to the United States. He wasn't saying, you know, Trump, you're a coward, come and get me. He was talking to his political opponent last year. So just because we're objective and just because we want everybody to have all the facts, we want everyone to know that that's what actually happened, and that was the original video, basically in full, so you could see. But it is interesting to see Trump, the probably one of the world's greatest trolls, and that video be put out for an occasion like that.
You know, love him or hate him, I think you could say he does a pretty good job of the social media.
100%. 100%. So anyway, folks, that's our report on what happened in Venezuela, the context leading up to it, the reaction from Canada's leaders, the geopolitical situation, and maybe the real reason why the United States went into Venezuela, because it was they thought it was turning into a legitimate threat to national security. We will see in the coming weeks, in the coming months, and in the coming years if that was actually the case, or we may never know at all. But let us know what you think, and where this may put Canada. But in the reactions that anyone on the left are saying, well, Trump's going to invade Canada now, see, he's going to do, give me a break. Give me a break. That's about as likely to happen as me voting for the NDP in the next election.